ballroom looked like something out of a fairy tale. Hundreds of white roses covered the tables, crystal chandeliers glittered above us, and soft music filled the room as guests celebrated the wedding of my only daughter, Emily. I sat beside my wife, Margaret, watching our daughter smile beside the man she had chosen to spend her life with. I should have been the happiest father in that room. Instead, one small movement caught my attention. My new son-in-law, Ryan, walked behind Margaret's chair while everyone was distracted by the photographers. He glanced around quickly, then reached into his jacket. At first, I thought he was fixing something on the chair. Then I saw the small bottle in his hand. He squeezed a clear liquid directly onto the seat. My stomach tightened. I knew exactly what it was: superglue. Ryan quickly slipped the bottle back into his pocket and walked away as if nothing had happened. Margaret was completely unaware. She was smiling and talking to one of Emily's relatives, preparing to sit down again. I felt my blood run cold. Why would the man who had just married my daughter want to glue my wife to a chair? I could have stood up. I could have grabbed him by the collar. I could have stopped the wedding reception right there. But then I looked at Emily. She was standing across the ballroom, smiling at her new husband with complete trust. And suddenly, I realized something terrifying. Ryan hadn't made a mistake. He had planned this. And whatever he was planning to do to my wife was only the beginning. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. I watched Ryan disappear into the crowd, shaking hands with guests and smiling as if he hadn't just done something cruel. My first instinct was to confront him. But then I looked at Margaret. She was completely unaware of what had happened. She reached for the chair, preparing to sit down, and I immediately stepped between her and the seat. "Wait, honey," I said gently. "Let's sit over here for a moment." She looked at me with a puzzled smile. "Why? What's wrong?" "Nothing," I replied. "I just want you closer to me." I pulled another chair beside mine and helped her sit down. Then I glanced back at the original chair. The clear glue was almost invisible beneath the soft fabric. If Margaret had sat there, she might have been trapped in front of hundreds of guests. But that wasn't what frightened me most. I couldn't understand why Ryan wanted to humiliate her in the first place. He had always been polite around us. He called Margaret Mom. He brought her flowers. He even gave a speech that afternoon about how grateful he was to be joining our family. Had all of it been an act? I looked across the ballroom. Ryan was watching me. For just a second, our eyes met. Then he smiled. Not a nervous smile, not an innocent smile. It was the smile of a man who believed he had gotten away with something. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him, not yet. If I accused him without knowing his motive, he'd simply deny everything. So I smiled back. I raised my glass as if nothing had happened. Ryan relaxed. He thought I hadn't seen him. That was his first mistake. I quietly pulled out my phone and began watching him from a distance. Because before this wedding ended, I intended to find out exactly why my new son-in-law wanted to hurt my wife, and if there was something bigger behind that bottle of superglue. I was going to uncover it. I kept watching Ryan from across the ballroom. He was laughing with the guests, accepting congratulations, posing for photographs beside my daughter. To everyone else, he looked like the perfect new husband. But I had already seen another side of him. A few minutes later, Ryan slipped away from the reception and headed toward a quiet hallway behind the ballroom. I waited. Then I followed him. I stopped before the hallway entrance and stayed behind a large decorative column. A moment later, Ryan's best friend, Jason, joined him. "You sure everything is ready?" Jason whispered. Ryan glanced toward the ballroom. "Everything is under control." My heart started pounding. Jason lowered his voice. "And her parents?" Ryan gave a quiet laugh. "They still think this is just a wedding." I pulled out my phone and started recording. Jason hesitated. "What if your wife finds out?" Ryan's expression suddenly changed. "She won't. And even if she does, Emily will believe me before she believes them." My stomach dropped. Emily, my daughter, was part of whatever this was. I listened carefully as Ryan continued. "Tonight has to go exactly as planned. After what happens to her mother, Emily will finally understand that her parents are becoming a problem." Jason frowned. "And then," Ryan smiled, "then Emily will have no reason to keep listening to them." I felt something inside me break. This wasn't about a stupid prank. Ryan wasn't simply trying to embarrass my wife. He was trying to drive a wedge between my daughter and her own family. But I still didn't understand why. What did he want from Emily? What was he planning to make her do? I quietly stepped away before they could notice me. As I returned toward the ballroom, I looked at my daughter. She was smiling, completely unaware that the man standing beside her had just revealed a plan to separate her from the people who loved her most. I clenched my phone in my hand. I had one question now. What was Ryan planning to take from my daughter? I returned to the ballroom before Ryan noticed I was gone. Emily was standing near the wedding cake, surrounded by her friends and relatives. She looked happier than I had seen her in years. She caught my eye and smiled. "Dad, why do you look so serious?" I forced a smile. "Just getting emotional. You're finally married." She laughed and hugged me. For a moment, I almost told her everything. I wanted to whisper, "Your husband is planning something against your mother." But I couldn't, not without proof. And not on her wedding day. I looked over her shoulder at Ryan. He was talking to the photographer, but his eyes kept moving toward us, watching, waiting. I suddenly understood that Ryan didn't want Emily to know what he was doing. That meant I still had an advantage. I pulled Emily aside. "Sweetheart, I need to ask you something." She looked concerned. "What is it?" "Has Ryan ever asked you to change anything about your parents? Your relationship with us?" She frowned. "No. Why would you ask that?" "Has he ever said that your mother is difficult, or that she interferes too much?" Emily shook her head. "Dad, he loves Mom. He always tells me how much he respects her." Those words hit me harder than I expected. Ryan had been pretending perfectly. Emily lowered her voice. "Is something wrong?" I looked at her innocent face. "No," I said. "Everything's fine." It was a lie, but I had no choice. Then Emily suddenly smiled. "Oh, Dad, Ryan wanted me to give you this after dinner." She handed me a small envelope. My name was written across the front. I opened it. Inside was a copy of a document. I read the first few lines. Then my hands went cold. It wasn't a wedding document. It was something connected to Emily's future finances, and at the bottom was Ryan's signature. I looked across the room. Ryan was already watching me. This time, he wasn't smiling. He knew I had seen it, and suddenly I realized the superglue wasn't the real threat. It was only the first move in a much bigger plan. I slipped the document back into the envelope and took a slow breath. I didn't want Ryan to know how much I had understood, so I walked toward him with a smile. "Congratulations again," I said. Ryan smiled back. "Thank you, Dad." I held up the envelope. "Emily gave me this." For half a second his face changed, then he recovered. "Oh, that. It's nothing important, just some paperwork for Emily. Of course, I replied. I walked away before he could say anything else. But I wasn't going home. Not yet. I found a quiet room near the back of the venue and opened the document again. It was a financial agreement connected to a joint investment account Emily had opened before the wedding. According to the document, Ryan wanted Emily to transfer control of that account after the wedding. And there was something else. A handwritten note was attached to the final page. After tonight, she will sign anything I put in front of her. I stared at those words, my hands tightened around the paper. So that was the plan. The glue wasn't meant to hurt Margaret. It was meant to create a humiliating scene. Ryan wanted my wife to look unstable and helpless in front of Emily and the wedding guests. Then he planned to use Emily's emotional state to push her into signing documents she normally would never accept. But why tonight? Why was the wedding so important? I took photographs of every page with my phone. Then I heard footsteps outside. I quickly put everything back into the envelope. The door opened. Ryan stood there. He looked at me, then at the envelope in my hand. "Everything okay, Dad?" I smiled. "Perfect." He studied my face for several seconds. Then he smiled too. "Good." He turned and walked away. I waited until his footsteps disappeared. Then I whispered to myself, "You made one mistake, Ryan. You assumed I was too old to understand your game." I pulled out my phone again. This time, I wasn't going to watch him. I was going to find the person who helped him create that document. I waited until Ryan disappeared back into the reception before I made my move. I called the number printed at the bottom of the financial document. A woman answered on the third ring. "Hello? I'm calling about a financial agreement prepared for Emily Carter." There was a long pause. "Who are you?" Her father. Another silence. Then her voice became nervous. "Mr. Carter, I think you should know that your daughter didn't request that agreement." My heart stopped. "Then who did?" She hesitated. "Your son-in-law." I closed my eyes. Everything was starting to make sense. "Did Emily sign anything?" "No, not yet." "Why not?" "Because Ryan told us she would sign it tonight." I gripped the phone tighter. "Tonight?" "Yes. He said there would be an incident during the reception that would leave her emotionally vulnerable. After that, he expected her to sign the transfer documents without questioning them." My blood ran cold. "So he planned this?" "Yes." "Who prepared the documents?" The woman hesitated again. "I did." "Why?" "Because Ryan told me Emily had already agreed to everything. I believed him." I looked toward the ballroom. Through the glass doors, I could see Ryan laughing beside my daughter. He looked completely relaxed. He still believed his plan was working. I thanked the woman and ended the call. Then another thought hit me. If Ryan had lied to the financial advisor, there was a good chance he had lied to other people too. I opened my phone and checked the photos I had taken of the document. There was a company name at the bottom. I searched it. The company was registered only 3 weeks earlier, and the listed director was Ryan. I stared at the screen. This wasn't just about my daughter's money. Ryan had created an entire operation around her, and my daughter had no idea. I put my phone away and walked back into the ballroom. Ryan noticed me immediately. He smiled. "Everything okay, Dad?" I smiled back. "Everything is perfect." But inside, I had already made my decision. I would let Ryan believe his plan was still working, because the next time he tried to trap my family, he was going to walk straight into a trap of my own. The reception was getting louder. Music filled the ballroom. Guests were laughing, and the photographers were moving from table to table. But I wasn't celebrating anymore. I was watching Ryan. He kept checking his phone. Every few minutes, he'd glance toward Emily, then toward Margaret. He was waiting for something. Finally, his phone buzzed. Ryan looked at the screen and smiled. A few seconds later, he walked over to Emily. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked. Emily nodded. I stayed close enough to hear them. Ryan lowered his voice. "There's something important I need you to sign before the night ends." Emily looked confused. "Sign what?" "Just some financial paperwork. It's nothing complicated." She looked toward me. "Dad, did you know about this?" Ryan answered before I could. "Your father knows. We discussed it earlier." I almost laughed. He had just lied directly to my daughter's face. Emily looked at me. "Dad?" I nodded calmly. "It's okay, sweetheart. Let him explain." Ryan relaxed. He thought I was protecting him. That was exactly what I wanted him to believe. He pulled a folder from his jacket. "I just need your signature here." Emily reached for the pen. Then I stepped forward. "Actually," I said, "there's something I'd like to see first." Ryan froze. "What?" I pointed toward the folder. "The original agreement." He swallowed. "This is the original." "No," I replied calmly. "It's not." The smile disappeared from his face. I took out my phone and showed Emily the photograph I had taken earlier. "The agreement I found has different pages." Emily stared at the screen. "Ryan, why are the pages different?" He immediately started talking. "It's a mistake. The attorney must have sent an old version." I looked directly into his eyes. "Then why did the attorney tell me that you were the one who requested the agreement?" Ryan went silent. For the first time that evening, he looked frightened. But I wasn't finished. I leaned closer and whispered so only he could hear. "You should have checked who was watching you." His face went pale. Then I stepped back and smiled. "Go ahead, Ryan." "Explain everything to my daughter." The music continued behind us. The guests were still laughing. But Ryan knew something had changed. He thought he had trapped my family. He had no idea that his entire plan was already collapsing. Ryan stared at the document in my hand. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he forced a nervous smile. "Dad, you're misunderstanding everything." Emily looked at him. "Then explain it." Ryan opened his mouth, but no words came out. I took out my phone. "I think everyone deserves to know what really happened tonight." Ryan's face changed immediately. "Don't." That single word told Emily everything. I walked toward the microphone near the wedding stage. The music slowly faded as the DJ noticed something was wrong. Hundreds of guests turned toward me. Emily stood beside Ryan, confused and frightened. I held up the small bottle of superglue. "This," I said, "was placed on my wife's chair tonight." A wave of whispers moved through the ballroom. Margaret looked at me in disbelief. "What?" I turned toward Ryan. "He did it." Ryan immediately shook his head. "That's a lie." I pressed a button on my phone. The recording played through the ballroom speakers. Ryan's own voice filled the room. "After what happens to a mother, Emily will finally understand that her parents are becoming a problem." Silence. Emily slowly turned toward her husband. "Ryan," he stepped toward her. "Emily, please listen to me. It's not what you think." But I played the second recording, his conversation with Jason, his plan to create an emotional scene, his plan to pressure Emily into signing the financial documents. Then I displayed photographs of the original paperwork on the large wedding screen. The guests could see everything. Emily covered her mouth. Tears filled her eyes. "You planned all of this?" Ryan looked around desperately. "No, I was trying to protect us. I shook my head. No, Ryan. I held up the final document. You were trying to control her. Emily slowly removed her wedding ring. Ryan stared at her. Emily, don't do this. She looked at him through her tears. You lied to me on the day you promised to spend your life with me. Then she placed the ring on the table. And in front of everyone who had come to celebrate their marriage, my daughter said the words Ryan never expected to hear. This wedding is over. For a few seconds, nobody in the ballroom moved. The music had stopped completely. All I could hear was Emily crying quietly beside me. Ryan stepped toward her. Emily, please, just give me 5 minutes to explain. She looked at him, tears running down her cheeks. You had the entire day to tell me the truth. Ryan shook his head desperately. I was angry with your parents, that's all. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. Margaret finally stepped forward. You put glue on my chair. Ryan looked at her. I was only trying to scare you. My wife stared at him in disbelief. You were willing to humiliate me at your own wedding. Ryan didn't answer. Emily looked down at the documents still lying on the table. Then she picked them up. This says I would transfer control of my investment account to you. Ryan immediately replied, It was temporary. I was trying to protect our future. Our future, Emily whispered. She looked at him for a long moment. Then why did you hide it from me? Ryan had no answer. He looked around the ballroom, searching for someone who might defend him. Nobody did. Even his closest friends had stepped away. Then Emily walked toward me. Dad? I opened my arms. She hugged me tightly. I'm sorry, she whispered. I held her close. You don't have to apologize for trusting someone. She pulled away and wiped her tears. Then she looked at Ryan one final time. You didn't just betray my parents. Her voice trembled, but she didn't back down. You betrayed me. Ryan lowered his head. Emily removed the last piece of jewelry connecting her to him and placed it beside the wedding ring. Then she turned toward the guests. This wedding is cancelled. A stunned silence filled the room. But this time, I didn't feel victorious. I felt relieved because my daughter had finally seen the truth for herself. And I knew the hardest part was still ahead. Ryan wasn't going to walk away quietly. Ryan didn't leave. He stood near the stage, staring at Emily as if he still believed he could change her mind. Then he looked at me. You ruined my life. I shook my head. No, Ryan. Your choices did that. He stepped closer, his voice becoming angry. You think you've won? I looked him directly in the eyes. No. I glanced at my daughter, then at my wife. I think my daughter won. Ryan was escorted out of the ballroom by the venue security. The guests slowly began leaving, whispering about what they had witnessed. The beautiful wedding decorations were still everywhere. The flowers, the cake, the photographs, everything that had been prepared for the happiest day of my daughter's life. But the marriage itself was over. Later that night, Emily sat beside her mother in our living room. She looked exhausted. I almost married him, she whispered. Margaret reached for her hand. But you didn't. Emily looked at me. Dad, how did you know something was wrong? I smiled sadly. I saw a bottle of superglue in his hand. She laughed through her tears. That sounds crazy. It does. I looked toward the window. But sometimes the smallest warning is the one that saves you from the biggest mistake. A few weeks later, the financial documents were turned over to the proper authorities. and Ryan's attempt to control Emily's money was stopped before he could take anything. Emily moved back home temporarily. She didn't lose her future. She didn't lose her family. She simply lost someone who never deserved her trust in the first place. And Margaret? She kept the chair. We eventually threw away the damaged one and bought a new dining set. But Margaret insisted on keeping one small piece of the old chair in a box. I asked her why. She smiled. Because every time I look at it, I'll remember that your eyes were open when mine weren't. I took her hand. That night, I realized something. I had walked into my daughter's wedding expecting to give her away. Instead, I ended up protecting her from the man she was about to marry. And if I had ignored that tiny bottle of superglue, I might have lost my daughter without ever knowing why.